Welcome to the AI-powered reader, your shortcut to unlocking the world's best books. Get ready to absorb key insights, understand core concepts, and expand your knowledge all in a fraction of the time. Let's dive in.
Today, we are diving into Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond. This book tackles a fundamental and deeply troubling question. Why is there so much hardship in a land of such abundance? Desmond presents a provocative central argument that American poverty is not an accident or a personal failing. Instead, it is a direct result of the choices and policies that benefit the affluent, a system where some lives are made small so that others may grow. The author, Matthew Desmond, is a leading authority on this subject. He's a professor of sociology at Princeton University and the principal investigator of the Eviction Lab. His previous book, Evicted, won the Pulitzer Prize, and he's the recipient of a MacArthur Genius Fellowship. His work forces us to confront an uncomfortable question. Are we, the affluent and secure, complicit in their suffering? Let's dive into the evidence he presents.
In his book, Poverty by America, sociologist Matthew Desmond asks a really tough question. It's not just why is there poverty, it's why is there so much of it in the wealthiest country in the history of the world? It's a direct, pretty uncomfortable question, and in this explainer, we're going to dive deep into how he answers it.
And really, that question? It's the engine driving this whole book. It's a question Desmond started asking himself way back as a college student. He was at Arizona State, surrounded by classmates driving BMWs, while he was literally stocking sardines in his dorm room to get by. He saw a city spending millions on an artificial lake in the middle of the desert, just blocks from where people were begging. This contrast, this bald scarcity right next to unbelievable opulence, that's what he spent his entire career trying to figure out.
Okay, let's jump right in. First, we're going to explore the author's own story in Poverty by Desmond. Then we'll map out his main argument in The Case Against Us. After that, we'll spend most of our time on 3 shocking truths. These are the absolute core of his book. And finally, we'll wrap up with the book's big contributions and how it handles common critiques in Strengths and Challenges. All right, so to really get this book, you kind of have to understand where Matthew Desmond is coming from. Because for him, this isn't just some academic project. It's deeply, deeply personal. You see, this one question just completely reframes the whole conversation. Desmond's big argument is that poverty in America isn't an accident, it's not inevitable. He suggests it's actually a choice, a result of policies and systems that we, the non-poor, not only benefit from but actively help keep in place. He's not writing about some problem happening over there, he's writing about a system that we are all a part of. And this is what's so incredible, right? You can draw a direct line from his own life to his life's work. I mean, his family lost their home when his dad, a pastor, lost his job. He had to work his way through college as a barista and even a wildland firefighter. And then for his graduate research on the housing crisis, he didn't just study it from a library. No, he lived in a mobile home park and a rooming house in Milwaukee to see it firsthand. So this book, it's really the culmination of a life spent witnessing, experiencing, and of course, rigorously studying American poverty.
So how exactly does Desmond build this case? Well, it's not just a collection of stories. He constructs a very clear, very methodical argument. Honestly, it's structured almost like a prosecutor laying out evidence, piece by piece, against a system.
Okay, so he breaks his case down into 3 main parts. First, he argues that the non-poor directly exploit the poor in the job market, in housing, and in the financial system. Second, he shows how the government actually gives the most help to those who need it the least, creating this massive but often invisible welfare state for the rich. And third, he explains how we hoard opportunities in our exclusive communities, basically building walls that keep other people out. We're going to break down each of these.
All right, this is where we get to the real heart of the matter, the core of our explainer today. The book's 3 most powerful and, frankly, pretty shocking truths. These are the ideas that Desmond says we absolutely have to face if we're serious about ending poverty.
So, the first big truth starts with redefining a word we think we know: exploitation.
For Desmond, this isn't some dusty academic concept. It's a concrete, everyday reality where one person's advantage comes directly at the expense of someone else's disadvantage. He's arguing that poverty doesn't just exist alongside wealth. In many ways, it's created by it. The system isn't just failing the poor, it's working for the rest of us at their expense.
And to really bring this home, he tells this incredible story about a man named Julio Paez. Just imagine this. Julio was working 80 hours a week, every week, across 2 full-time, minimum wage jobs in California. A graveyard shift at McDonald's, a couple hours of sleep in his car, and then clocking in at a temp agency. And he wasn't doing this to get ahead. This was just to survive. His story is just this powerful gut punch of an example of labor exploitation, where our demand for cheap stuff is met by paying people wages they can't possibly live on.
And here's the number that hangs over Julio's story: $7.25. That's the federal minimum wage. It hasn't moved since 2009. Think about that. Desmond argues this isn't just a low number. It's a deliberate policy choice that lets companies boost their profits by keeping labor costs dangerously low for millions of workers just like Julio.
Okay, get this, because the exploitation continues in housing, but in a way you would never expect. You'd probably think being a landlord in a poor neighborhood would be less profitable, right? More risks, more repairs, but Desmond's research shows the exact opposite. After you account for everything, all the costs, the missed payments, landlords in the poorest neighborhoods often make double the profit of those in wealthy areas. Why? Because they can charge high rents to a captive audience that has nowhere else to go.
And it doesn't stop there. Let's talk about the financial system. Just look at this chart on overdraft fees. Back in 2019, big banks raked in nearly $12 billion from these fees alone. So who paid for that? A staggering 84% of those fees came from just 9% of customers, specifically people with an average bank balance under $350. It is literally a system that makes it expensive to be poor.
Okay, let's move on to the second shocking truth, and it all starts with a simple question. If you were to ask most people who gets the most help from the US government, they'd probably say the poor, right? Well, Desmond argues that if you look at the whole picture, that is just flat out wrong.
And the absolute key to understanding this, is the difference between what he calls visible and invisible welfare. On the left, you've got the visible stuff for the poor, like food stamps. Everyone knows about them, and they're often stigmatized. But on the right, you have welfare for the affluent, huge tax breaks for homeowners, tax-free college savings plans, subsidies for health insurance. These benefits are way, way bigger, but they're designed to feel like you're just keeping your own money, not getting a government handout.
And when you look at the actual numbers, it's just stunning. Once you add up all the federal benefits, including all those tax breaks, the average household in the top 20% gets almost $10,000 more per year in government help than the average household in the bottom 20%. The government, Desmond argues, gives the most help to those who need it the least. It's completely upside down.
Okay, so the third and final truth he lays out is all about geography. It's about where we live and the walls we build, both literally and figuratively. Desmond's point is that poverty isn't just about an individual lacking money, it's about a whole community lacking resources. At the same time, wealth isn't just about individual success, it's a concentration of advantages. And we actively, deliberately create these separate worlds. And he shows how we do it not by accident, but with laws. In many American cities, on 3/4 of residential land, it is literally illegal to build anything other than a single-family home. This is called exclusionary zoning. It makes it impossible to build apartments or other affordable housing, which keeps property values high and lower-income families out. And Desmond is quick to point out this isn't a partisan thing. Homeowners from across the political spectrum often join forces to block these developments, creating what he calls wealth traps in rich areas and poverty traps everywhere else.
All right, so now that we have those huge core arguments on the table, let's step back and take a balanced look at the book itself. We'll touch on its major strengths, and then see how Desmond takes on some of the most common arguments you hear about what causes poverty.
You know, one of the most powerful things about this book is how it completely reframes the debate. It forces the conversation away from blaming poor people for their situation and puts the spotlight on the systems that create poverty in the first place. He's a master at weaving together hard data with these unforgettable human stories. But most of all, it's a direct challenge to the reader, especially the affluent reader, to look in the mirror and see how our own lives are connected to this problem. And then he offers a bold set of solutions he calls poverty abolitionism.
Now, let's dig into how Desmond handles some common counter-arguments. First up, the idea that single parenthood causes poverty. Desmond's response is to look at other rich countries. A big study of 18 democracies found that single mothers outside the U.S. generally weren't any poorer than anyone else. So what's the difference? He argues it's because those countries have much stronger safety nets, things like affordable childcare and paid family leave that support all families.
All right, what about the argument that immigrants take jobs and drain our resources? Well, Desmond points to the research which just doesn't back that up. Economists have found that the effect of immigration on the wages of native-born workers is tiny, mainly because new immigrants are competing for jobs with other recent immigrants. And on top of that, he cites evidence showing that over their lifetime, the average immigrant pays way more in taxes than they ever receive in benefits.
And finally, what about that old stereotype of welfare dependency? Well, Desmond just flips this whole idea right on its head. He says the real problem is welfare avoidance. He shows data that billions upon billions of dollars in government aid go unclaimed every single year. And it's not because people don't need it. It's because the system to get help is often so confusing, so burdensome, and so humiliating that many people who qualify just give up.
And this all leads to Desmond's final, powerful conclusion. He completely reframes the debate about government spending. In his view, being fiscally responsible isn't about cutting aid for the poor. It's about stopping the massive, inefficient, and often hidden river of money that flows to the most affluent Americans.
And so the book leaves us with this final, haunting question. It pushes us beyond the numbers and the policies to think about the immense human cost of all this, the wasted talent, the unrealized potential, the brilliant minds we'll never know. It's really a question about what kind of society we could be if we finally decided to become one without poverty.
That's all for this episode of the AI-Powered Reader. We hope today's summaries sparked new ideas and brought you valuable insights. If you enjoyed what you heard, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and consider leaving a review. It really helps others discover the show. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep reading, or rather listening.